Hi everyone. I had a really great reading month. So, do you want to hear what I read in December? Stay tuned. Hi everyone. Welcome to Book Talks with Miss Thomas. I'm Miss Thomas and I'm so glad you're here. If you are new here and you love hearing about great books, please hit that subscribe button so that you can be notified whenever I post a new video. I have committed to at least a monthly reading wrap up, and I don't know. We'll see what the new year brings. But the month of December was fantastic. And so let me tell you about the things I read in December. Now, I also did a Christmas reads video, Christmas novels, I think I called it. If you're interested in that and you just want to know what I read, or maybe next year you'll want to check that one out, that's a separate video. So these are 7 books that I read in addition to the Christmas books. So for those of you who like statistics, let me see. 7 plus, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 books. So I took a road trip with my husband and my 2 boys, and we needed an audio book that we could all agree on. Now, my boys, and really my husband for that matter, they're not going to be terribly engrossed in any audiobook. It's really more, what kind of book would I be willing to play in the car where my husband and sons might hear parts of it and not make me miserable by teasing me about things like heaving or profane language or inappropriate content, most of which I avoid in books. But I tried to find something sort of light because my family was in the car. And so I landed on Janet Evonovich. And come to find out, my oldest son, at least, enjoyed a Stephanie Plum book. Now, we didn't listen. He wasn't listening from beginning to end. I was. But there were some times when I was listening and it wasn't in the car with my family. But my son, he did pick up on some of the characters, and he especially liked Lula. I think that's her name, Lula or Lola. I'm pretty sure, or Lulu. But he liked that character, the woman with the crazy outfits and just kind of an outspoken woman. And always, ready for action. So she was funny. And if you're not familiar with the Stephanie Plum series, it is a series of books about Stephanie Plum, who's a 20-something bail bonds agent for her, I think it's her uncle or her cousin, in New Jersey. And so she's always trying to track down these people that skip out on their bail. And so the first one that I listened to was Game On, Tempting 28. And that is when Stephanie Plum is trying to track down a computer hacker who skipped out on his bail. His name was Oswald Wednesday. And come to find out, her friend Diesel is also trying to catch up with Oswald Wednesday. And he turns out to be a very crazy, twisted character, and not in a good way. So there are these other hackers who really look up to Oswald Wednesday, and so they hack into his computer network as a way to just say, we did it. We got into Oswald Wednesday's computer and or database, I guess. And they're just doing it for fun, and they thought that he would be impressed, but instead, he starts murdering them. So Stephanie Plum is trying to catch up to Oswald Wednesday along with Diesel because he skipped out on bond, but also now he's killing these nerdy little computer hackers. And the nerdy little hackers are they're funny and sweet and harmless. The next Janet Evonovich book that I listened to, because I just sort of got on a kick and I listened to 3 Janet Evonovich books. But the next one was Top Secret 21. And that is the one where Stephanie Plum is trying to track down Jimmy Paletti, who is a used car salesman and all-around dirtbag. And he is just a real jerk, and he's involved in some disgusting things. Among them, I think it was human trafficking, or at least prostituting younger girls. But Stephanie Plum books, they don't really get into the details. They're sort of light, fluffy mysteries. it's there that Jimmy Paletti did these disgusting things, but it doesn't go into detail. There's nothing, I wouldn't say there's anything triggering about the book. It doesn't really, she's trying to catch him because he did this kind of thing. And Jimmy Paletti has this accountant who is very short and very kind of a weasel and just whiny and annoying. And Stephanie Plum sort of ends up teaming up with him because he might know where Paletti is. So Stephanie and the weasel accountant are trying to track down Paletti. So as Stephanie Plum is trying to track down Jimmy Paletti with the sidekick annoying weasel accountant, there is this Russian guy who is trying to get to Ranger. And because he's trying to get to Ranger, he also targets Stephanie Plum because she's with Ranger sometimes. And so, of course, Stephanie is in danger and needs the protection of Ranger. The Russian assassin is somehow ends up in a casino, and so Stephanie Plum and Ranger end up in casinos. Stephanie sort of goes undercover as this voluptuous girl, and it's just very silly. I liked the Las Vegas gambling only in that the grandmother shows up there, and I thought that was very funny. Stephanie Plum's grandmother is hilarious. And so she decides in this particular book that she wants a bucket list. And so she creates a bucket list. And one thing on her bucket list is to get a very detailed look at Ranger. So she's, just up to some crazy antics, as the grandma usually is in these Janet Evonovich books. And that one was just funny if you like a silly grandma, which I did. I thought that was one of Stephanie Plum, one of the funnier books in the Janet Evonovich Stephanie Plum series. I also got an audiobook, Wicked Appetite by Janet Evonovich, because it said it was the first in the series, and I wanted to know how the whole Stephanie Plum series started. However, I was mistaken because it turned out that Wicked Appetite was not a Stephanie Plum series. It was a completely different character. There was an appearance, though, from Diesel. I think Diesel's a main character in that series, and that was Lizzie. Lizzie bakes these cupcakes, and she's very, very good at it. And come to find out, she's good at it because she has inherited supernatural powers. And, I'm a Christian, so that's not really the kind of book I would typically read. It didn't offend me. I don't believe in that kind of thing. But, it just really wasn't the series for me. But I did finish the book. It was cute and a little bit funny and light. And the thing that kept me going with that book was Lizzie ends up adopting this really cute, funny little ninja cat who apparently is also supernatural. So I liked the cat in the book. And it was a little bit funny because Lizzie, she has these powers as a baker. Everyone likes her cupcakes because of her supernatural history. And then there's this character who is after Lizzie. I think his name is Grimwald. I wrote it down. He appears in a few of these books. Gerwolf. I think his name was Gerwolf Grimoire. And he's targeting Lizzie because he wants her powers. And so Diesel is trying to protect Lizzie from him. But the funny thing is that there are these stones that they're all trying to track down. The stones give you a sin of gluttony. And so the first person who has one of these stones is a gluttonous customer of Lizzie's who is obsessed with her cupcakes and just eats her cupcakes all the time. And so when Lizzie gets the stone, she starts wanting cupcakes excessively. And so that was a little bit funny, the different stones and what kind of gluttonous thing was going to affect the characters in that part of the book. And that book took place in Salem, Massachusetts. And so it also plays into the whole witchcraft thing. Again, I'm more of a Stephanie Plum person. I got the book by accident, but I finished it. It was fun. Okay, now moving into a very funny book that I listened to and loved. I really thought this was a very funny book. But I have to warn you, especially if you're a conservative Christian, this book might not be for you. It had a lot of things that were not lovely and but if you're okay with some of the things in this world, we do live in this world, and you can laugh and not take too seriously. There was a very funny book called Dial A for Aunties by Jesse. I want to make sure I say it right. I don't have my glasses on. Dial A for Aunties is by Jesse Q. Sutanto, and it was very funny. It was the story of this girl, and her name was Maddie, Medi. And at first I thought it was the accent that the women were saying Medi and they meant to say Maddie, but it's actually spelled M-E, Medi. And she is, she's grown up in Los Angeles, I believe. But she is raised by her mother and her 4 aunts who are Chinese. They have come over to America and raised her as an American. And her father left when she was very young. And so she has this mother and these 4 aunts, and they are very, very overbearing and very involved in her life, and just I thought they were a delight. I thought they were delightful. They were hilarious. I immensely enjoyed Dial A for Aunties. Okay, so let me tell you, in the book, Medi's mother decides to catfish. She gets on the internet and creates a profile as if she is Medi. And she goes around looking for men to set her daughter up with. And this is all the beginning. There aren't even spoilers. It's just, there's a lot of action in this book. And so the mother finds this man that she thinks would make a good date for Medi. And so she presents herself as Medi and lines up a date with this guy, and then says to her daughter, along with the 4 aunts, oh, we found a guy for you. You're going to go out on a date with this guy. And the date does not go well because the mother did not understand, some of the emojis and, the texting and that kind of stuff. I don't know either. I'm not up on that sort of thing. But so there was a misunderstanding on the date, and Medi ends up killing the guy in self-defense. Now, again, this is not a violent, scary book. This is a comedy book. So it doesn't really give you the details, but Medi carries a taser, and in self-defense, she tased him because she thought he was going to attack her, and he wrecked the car. And she panics and puts him in the trunk of the car and drives to her mother. Now, this is all the beginning of the book, so I'm not telling you any spoilers. But she goes to her mother and she says, that guy you set me up with, he's in the trunk. What do I do? So, of course, the mother calls the 4 aunties. And the 4 aunties come over and they decide to help Medi and her mother sort out this whole mess. And, of course, it starts out with them much more interested in what kind of taser did Medi have? And is it as good as, the one auntie has a different taser? And then there's this side conversation about fruit, and some fruits are better than other fruits, and they got some really good deals on fruits, and then eventually they get to the body in the trunk. And it's just a very funny, silly story about a girl who is raised by a woman and 4 aunts, and they are just hilarious, overbearing women, and I thought it was very funny. Now, there are some things in there that are not school appropriate. So let me just tell you, if you're going to be offended, there's profanity, there's blasphemy, there's some crude situations. But I thought it was a pretty funny book. And, I didn't take that kind of thing very seriously as I was reading. I was more interested in the relationship between Medi and her mother and her aunts. So that was a good one. Dial A for Aunties. Forget Me Not is a young adult book that I enjoyed, and that one was written as poetry, which I thought was very interesting. It follows 2 teenagers, and it's written in a poetic form, which was it was a delight. And the first teenager is a girl named Callie, or Calliope, and she has Tourette syndrome, and her mother moves around a lot with her. The mother is always looking for a man. The dad died when she was very very young, and the mother wants to find a new husband, and so she moves around, and every time she breaks up with a man, she picks up and moves Calliope. And this is very hard for Calliope because Calliope, or Callie, has Tourette's syndrome, and her one thing that she loves is her beautiful long hair. But she pulls on it because it's a tick, a nervous tick, and so the mother cuts it, and she feels very unattractive, and she starts this new high school. And of course, there's a neighbor in the story who is also her friend, and his name, I think, is Jinsong, and he's class president. He's Mr. Popular. He's an athlete. He plays baseball. And so Callie and Jinsong form this unique friendship, but Jinsong keeps it secret because he's embarrassed to be friends with somebody who has Tourette's and who, has this short haircut and dresses differently. And so he struggles throughout the book with how to be a friend, and the fact that he's really not being a very good friend, but he does genuinely like Callie and care about her. And so you get his perspective on a lot of the mean girls and the way the mean girls treat Callie, and the way even some of his guy friends who play baseball with him judge Callie. And he struggles with that, and yet he doesn't speak up. And so there's an internal struggle throughout the book for Jinsong, and what it is to be a friend, and is it okay to have feelings, or friendship feelings, not romantic feelings, that aren't going to make you popular. And Callie, of course, struggles with just, she has Tourette's, and throughout the book she tries to keep that a secret. She's afraid that if she tells people she has Tourette's, that they will think she's dangerous or something. I didn't quite understand the reasoning there, but I'm sure the struggle is real, and she tries to keep it secret, and so she's left being judged for her tics without explaining them. And there's some mean things going on. Some of the kids are mean to her, and it's really a lovely story of friendship between Callie and Jinsong. And the poetry, the way the book was written, the way it unfolds as a poem, I thought was very lovely as well. And the last book I read this month is Lessons in Chemistry by Bonnie Garmus. And I thought that would be a romance just from the cover. It looks like, a cute girl and lessons in chemistry. And boy, was I in for a rude awakening. That was a delightful book that was very unromantic. It was the story of Elizabeth Zott, who wants to be a chemist in the, I want to say 1950s. It might have been the 60s. I think it was the 50s. And she wants to be a chemist, and no one takes her seriously. And she is very intellectual, and she does seem to lack some social awareness, but that's just because she's so brutally honest with herself and about herself and with others, that sometimes it puts her in some awkward conversations. People don't really respond very well. Eleanor Oliphant is completely fine. Comes to mind, if you've read that book, how Eleanor would say things and other people would perceived that as rude when she was just speaking her mind. Elizabeth Zott was a little bit like that. Well, a lot like that. And so the story begins with Elizabeth Zott, this chemist, who walks onto a TV set and confronts the producer because the producer's daughter goes to school with her daughter. Her daughter's name is Madeline. And Elizabeth is angry because she feels that the producer's daughter is stealing Madeline's lunches. And of course, it's sort of a misconception. Madeline and the little girl are actually friends, I would say. But the producer wants to make Elizabeth Zott the host of a TV show, and he gets this idea that she's going to host a TV show called Supper at 6. But then the book backflashes. It goes back several years to Elizabeth Zott's early stages in her career as a chemist, and how she tries, well, actually, I think it begins with her in grad school, and it talks about why she didn't go on to get her PhD. And it was because of sexism and just horrific treatment of her as a woman in the field of chemists, of trying to be a chemist among men. And there was a lot about the way she was mistreated as a woman in sort of the man's world in the 1950s. And I thought, that was very sad. So I want to say it's a funny book, but the way she was treated and some of the statements about women and the plight of women, specifically in the 1950s, there was some sad things in the book, but there were also some very funny things. So even though the story begins with Elizabeth Zott confronting the TV producer, it then backpedals to her life as a scientist. And there she meets and falls in love with Calvin Evans, the Nobel Prize winning scientist who has his own backstory. And so you get the backstory of Elizabeth and Calvin and how that relationship unfolds. And I hope that's not a spoiler, because we know in the very beginning of the book that Elizabeth is the mother of a girl named Madeline. So we find out how Madeline came to be and how this other dad on the TV station wants to turn Elizabeth Zott from chemist to TV show host. And I would say hostess, but Elizabeth Zott would probably correct me, because the hostess would be adding a diminutive, which would make something smaller, and that would offend someone like Elizabeth Zott. So she was just a very multi-dimensional character, and I enjoyed her immensely. The characters in that book, Lessons in Chemistry, were just wonderful. I'm going to miss them. Now that I've finished the book. Have you ever read a book like that where you finish and you're like, oh, now what am I going to do? Elizabeth's gone. Elizabeth has a dog that she names 630, and there is the TV producer's name was Walter, and then Maddie makes her friends with this priest. I think he was a priest. He was a religious leader of some sort. I want to say Catholic priest. And Madeline makes friends with him. And he was a very interesting character too, because even though he's a religious leader, he's struggling with his faith. And Elizabeth Zott comes right out and says that she doesn't believe in God. And in the 1950s, that creates quite a stir. People are offended by that. And there's a lot, not a whole lot. It wasn't the focus of the book, but there was definitely some exploration of faith and what is faith and how different people can have different ideas about faith. And I'm comfortable enough with myself to be comfortable with those topics in the book. And I enjoyed the book. I was not comfortable with the blasphemy. There is a lot of blasphemy and profanity in the book. I have to warn you about that. But there were some wonderful things in the book too. And if you can read it with this idea that different people have different views, and it's delightful to get to know them. And Elizabeth Zott, I will say, was very protective of a woman's right to believe in God. She says in her book, she didn't believe in God, but another character did, and she applauds that woman for saying so. So, there's different perspectives, and the book presents that. And I enjoyed that. Another thing about Lessons in Chemistry that I really enjoyed is the chapter titles. There were some wonderful titles, and I found myself really trying to figure out what the title was going to have to do with the chapter. And that got to be sort of a game for me that I enjoyed. So those are my books for December. It was a great reading month. Please feel free in the comments to tell me if you read anything you think I might enjoy, or what you like to read and why you enjoyed it. And I will get on here sometime soon. I still need to talk about my project for grad school, and there's been a lot going on. So I'll fill you in, maybe do a channel update or something soon. Bye-bye for now.